In the darkest corners of the galaxy, where civilizations rise and fall like waves against cosmic shores, there exists a legend whispered in 1,000 alien tongues. They speak of a being who walks between worlds, leaving only silence in his wake. Some call him Myth, others call him Nightmare. But those who have truly seen him know the truth. He is both salvation and damnation wrapped in human flesh. The Galactic Council believed they had captured just another primitive human soldier. They were wrong. What they had done was awaken something that had been deliberately sleeping, something that entire star systems had learned to fear. For in their sterile prison cells and diplomatic chambers, they had caged the one being in the universe who had earned a title that made even ancient species tremble. They had captured the Reaper. And now, as alien eyes begin to recognize the truth of what sits silently in their midst, the galaxy itself holds its breath. Because when the Reaper stirs from his chosen slumber, worlds burn, not in conquest, but in the terrible mathematics of justice that only humanity has ever truly mastered. This is not a story of first contact. This is a story of last chances. The detention facility of Nexus Station orbited the neutral zone between 12 different species territories, its gleaming metal corridors designed to hold the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. Admiral Zach Th of the Hegemony walked these halls with the confidence of someone who had seen every horror the universe could produce. The crystalline being's multiple eyes swept across the holding cells, each containing creatures that had terrorized entire sectors. But today, something felt different. The human sat in cell block 7, completely motionless. He had been that way for the 72 standard hours since his capture, never speaking, never moving except to breathe. The other prisoners had initially tried to intimidate him through the energy barriers. A massive Brutic warrior had roared challenges. A hive mind collective had whispered threats. Even a shadow creature from the void dimensions had attempted to break his spirit with fear. The human had simply stared ahead, his dark eyes reflecting nothing but an emptiness that somehow seemed deeper than the void itself. Status report, Admiral Zach Th demanded as he approached the monitoring station. The duty officer, a nervous trill named Vexen, immediately straightened his forearms. No changes, sir. The prisoner hasn't spoken since capture. Medical scans show he's healthy, but Vexen hesitated, his spotted skin shifting to a pale blue that indicated uncertainty. But what? Sir, there's something unusual about his bioreadings. His heart rate never varies. His brain activity remains constant. It's almost as if he's not actually here, mentally speaking. Admiral Zach Th moved closer to the observation window. The human was unremarkable in appearance. Average height for his species, perhaps 40 standard years of age, with graying hair at his temples. He wore the simple gray uniform all prisoners received and showed no visible injuries despite the significant struggle his captors had reported during his arrest. What was he captured for again? Vexen consulted his datapad. Illegal weapons trading in the Corvani sector. Local authorities said he was selling advanced human military hardware to rebel factions. When they tried to arrest him, he resisted. Took down 17 officers before they managed to stun him unconscious. 17? That seems excessive for a simple weapons dealer. The arresting officers were quite insistent about the number, sir. They also mentioned something unusual. He never used any weapons during the fight. Hand-to-hand combat only, but with a level of efficiency they'd never witnessed before. Admiral Zach Th studied the human more carefully. There was something about the way he sat, perfectly balanced, as if he could explode into motion at any moment despite appearing completely relaxed. The Admiral had seen many warriors in his time, had fought in the border wars against the Savage Collective, had witnessed the disciplined might of the Eternal Empire soldiers. But this human possessed a stillness that seemed almost unnatural. Has anyone identified him yet? That's the strange part, sir. His biometric data doesn't match any records in a galactic database. No criminal history, no military service records, no civilian identification. It's as if he doesn't exist. Everyone exists somewhere, Commander. Perhaps his people simply don't share their records with the council. Actually, sir, I took the liberty of contacting the Terran embassy. They claim no knowledge of this individual, said they've never seen him before, and that his genetic markers don't match any known human populations. Admiral Zach Th's crystalline form shifted slightly, a sign of growing interest. In his 3 centuries of life, he had learned to recognize when the universe was presenting him with a puzzle. And puzzles, in his experience, usually meant trouble. I want enhanced security protocols on Cell Block 7 and Contact Intelligence Division. I want every database in the galaxy searched for any reference to this human. As the Admiral spoke, he noticed something that made his core temperature drop several degrees. The human's head had turned just slightly, and those dark eyes were now looking directly at him through the one-way observation window. There was no way the prisoner could see through the enhanced barrier, no way he could know he was being watched. Yet somehow, Admiral Zach Th was certain the human was looking directly at him. 3 decks below, in the station's main computer core, Senior Technician Mordak was having a very unusual day. The Ythran's 6-fingered hands danced across holographic interfaces as he tried to trace an anomaly in the station's security system. "This makes no sense," he muttered to his assistant, a young human exchange student named Sarah Chun. "Someone accessed our prisoner database 17 times in the last hour, but there's no record of who made the queries or where they originated from." Sarah leaned over his shoulder, her own fingers flying across secondary interfaces. As part of the cultural exchange program between the Galactic Council and the Terran Federation, she had been assigned to Nexus Station to learn about multi-species cooperation. What she hadn't expected was to become involved in a genuine mystery. "The access pattern is strange, too," she noted. "Look at this. Whoever it was, they weren't searching randomly. They knew exactly what they were looking for. The queries were targeted, specific. Almost like they already knew what they would find," Mordak finished. "But that's impossible. The system shows no external breaches, no unauthorized access. What if the access came from inside the station?" Mordak's scales shifted to a deep purple, indicating confusion. That would mean someone with legitimate access credentials was searching for information about. He paused, checking the query logs. Cell Block 7. The new human prisoner. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard about the mysterious prisoner through station gossip, a human who had appeared from nowhere and now sat in perfect silence, refusing to acknowledge the existence of anyone around him. "Mordak, pull up the personnel files for everyone with level 7 access or higher. Cross-reference with anyone who has accessed prisoner information in the last 72 hours. The Ythran's hands moved with practiced efficiency. Within moments, a list appeared on the main screen. It contained exactly 3 names: Admiral Zakdich, Security Chief Gralnox, and Dr. Ithera, the station's Chief Medical Officer. "That's it." Sarah frowned. "Only 3 people have looked at the prisoner files?" "According to the computer, yes. But look at this." Mordak highlighted a series of timestamps. These queries happened simultaneously with the Admiral's visit to Cell Block 7. But look at the access origin points. Sarah's blood ran cold. The 17 mysterious queries had come from 17 different locations throughout the station. Maintenance shafts, storage compartments, and used laboratories, even the waste recycling center. All places where no terminals existed, no access points were installed. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I'm beginning to think impossible is a relative term today," Mordak replied grimly. In the station's medical bay, Dr. Ithera was experiencing her own moment of impossibility. The insectoid physician had been studying the medical scans taken of the human prisoner, and what she found defied everything she knew about human physiology. Computer display comparative analysis between standard human baselines and prisoner-designated 77 Alpha. The holographic display showed 2 overlapping biological signatures. At first glance, they appeared identical: same bone density, same muscle mass distribution, same organ placement. But When Dr. Ithera enhanced the neural mapping, the differences became startling. The prisoner's brain showed activity patterns unlike anything in her medical database. While most sentient beings displayed the random, chaotic fluctuations of active thought, the human's neural activity was perfectly ordered, almost mathematical in its precision. It was as if his mind operated according to some fundamental law of physics, rather than the biological chaos of organic consciousness. More disturbing were the muscular and skeletal modifications she detected. Microfractures in every bone that had healed with density-enhancing compounds she couldn't identify. Muscle fibers that showed signs of systematic enhancement through methods that didn't match any known human augmentation techniques. Even his cardiovascular system had been modified, though so subtly that only the most advanced medical scanners could detect the changes. Computer, search Galactic Medical Database for any species showing similar biological modifications. Search complete. No matches found. Dr. Ithera's mandibles clicked nervously. In 30 years of practice, she had treated members of over 200 species. She had never encountered biological modifications this extensive that left no trace of their origin. Computer, search military database for enhancement techniques matching observed modifications. Access denied. Insufficient security clearance. That gave her pause. Her medical clearance was among the highest on the station. What kind of military secrets required even higher authorization? She was about to attempt another search when her communication panel chimed. The face of Admiral Zach Th appeared on her screen. "Doctor, I need a full medical evaluation of the human prisoner. Everything you can tell me about his background, his capabilities, anything that might explain who he is." "Admiral, I was just conducting that analysis. I'm afraid the results are unusual." "How unusual?" "Sir, this human has been systematically enhanced using techniques I cannot identify. The modifications are so extensive and sophisticated that they must have taken years to complete. Whoever did this had access to medical technology far beyond anything in our database." There was a long pause before the Admiral responded. "Doctor, what would someone need that level of enhancement for?" "Dr. Ithera considered the question carefully. The modifications she had observed weren't random. They followed a pattern that suggested specific tactical applications. Enhanced bone density for surviving impact trauma. Modified muscle fibers for increased strength and speed. Cardiovascular improvements for extended physical exertion. Neural modifications that allowed for perfect emotional control." "Admiral," she said slowly, "these modifications would be ideal for someone whose profession involved extreme physical danger on a regular basis. Someone who needed to be faster, stronger, and more resilient than any normal member of their species. Someone who couldn't afford to let emotions cloud their judgment in life-or-death situations. A soldier. More than that, sir. A soldier is trained for war. These modifications, they're designed for something much more precise. More personal." "What do you mean?" Dr. Ithera looked at the scan results one more time, noting the surgical precision with which every enhancement had been implemented. "Sir, if I had to guess, I would say these modifications were designed for assassination." The communication went silent for nearly a full minute. When Admiral Zach Th finally responded, his voice carried a weight that made Dr. Ithera's carapace tingle with anxiety. "Doctor, I want you to run one more search. Check every database we have access to, military intelligence, even the classified archives. Look for any reference to enhanced human operatives, any mention of assassination programs, any hint of what we might be dealing with." "Sir, that could take hours. Then you'd better get started immediately." The screen went dark, leaving Dr. Ithera alone with her growing sense of dread. She had a terrible feeling that whatever she discovered would change everything they thought they knew about their seemingly harmless prisoner. Back in cell block 7, the human continued to sit in perfect stillness. But if anyone had been monitoring the energy patterns around his cell, they would have noticed something impossible. The quantum field generators that powered the containment barriers were fluctuating in a pattern that matched exactly the rhythm of the prisoner's heartbeat. And somewhere in the station's deepest archives, automated systems began responding to queries that had never been made, searching for files that had been classified at levels so high that most of the Galaxy Council didn't know they existed. Files that contained a single word repeated over and over again, a word that had once struck terror into the hearts of entire civilizations. Reaper. But the human in cell block 7 continued to sit in silence, waiting for something that only he could recognize. Waiting for the moment when the galaxy would remember why some legends were never meant to be awakened. Security Chief Growlnox had survived 3 wars, 2 assassination attempts, and a prison riot that claimed 47 lives. The towering reptilian had earned his position through a combination of tactical brilliance and the kind of paranoia that kept important people alive in dangerous places. But as he reviewed the overnight security reports from Cell Block 7, he felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: genuine unease. "Explain this to me again," he growled at Officer Kethier, his voice carrying the rumbling undertones that made most species instinctively step backward. The young Andorian's blue skin had paled to an almost white shade. "Sir, at 0347 hours, all surveillance equipment in Cell Block 7 experienced simultaneous malfunctions. The cameras went dark for exactly 17 seconds. The audio pickups recorded nothing but static, and the motion sensors registered anomalous readings throughout the entire deck." 17 seconds. Growlnox's yellow eyes narrowed. "And what do our backup systems show?" "That's the problem, sir. The backup systems registered no malfunction at all. According to them, surveillance was normal throughout the night. But we have 17 seconds of missing primary surveillance data that the backups insist never happened." Growlnox felt his tail twitch involuntarily, a nervous habit he'd developed during his military days. "And the prisoner?" "Unchanged, sir. When the cameras came back online, he was sitting exactly as he had been before the blackout. Same position, same posture. But, Officer Kethier hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she consulted her data pad. "Sir, thermal imaging shows that for those 17 seconds, his body temperature dropped to exactly match the ambient temperature of his cell. It's as if he became thermally invisible." "That's biologically impossible." "Yes, sir. That's what the medical team said when we showed them the readings." Growlnox studied the reports more carefully. In 40 years of security work, he had learned to recognize patterns that others missed. And the pattern emerging from Cell Block 7 was unlike anything he had ever encountered. "Have there been any other incidents?" "Actually, sir, yes. 3 separate incidents involving station personnel who reported unusual dreams last night. All 3 described the same thing: vivid nightmares about being hunted by something they couldn't see. Medical examined them this morning and found elevated stress hormones and signs of sleep deprivation, but no obvious cause." "What does that have to do with our prisoner?" "Sir, all 3 personnel have security clearances that give them access to Cell Block 7. And all 3 reported that in their dreams, the thing hunting them whispered a single word over and over again." Growlnox's scales shifted to a darker shade, his species' equivalent of raising hackles. "What word?" "Reaper, sir." The security chief stood motionless for several moments, his predator's instincts screaming warnings he didn't yet understand. He had heard that word before, though he couldn't immediately place where. But it carried connotations that made his ancient hindbrain flood his system with adrenaline. "I want enhanced monitoring on Cell Block 7. And I want background checks on every person who has had access to that area in the last 72 hours. If someone is playing psychological games with my personnel, I'll find them." As Officer Kethier left to carry out his orders, Growlnox accessed his personal database and began searching for references to the word Reaper. What he found made his blood run cold. Deep in the intelligence archives, protected by security protocols that required 3 separate authorizations to access, was a single file. It contained no details, no explanations, just a list of dates and locations scattered across the galaxy over the past 50 years. Beside each entry was a single notation: Reaper confirmed. The locations were spread across dozens of star systems, encompassing the territories of multiple species. But when Graunox cross-referenced the dates with historical records, a pattern emerged that made his hands tremble as he worked. Every date corresponded to the death of someone significant. Politicians, military leaders, crime bosses, corporate executives, all had died on the dates listed in the file. But these weren't random deaths. Each victim had been someone who threatened galactic stability, someone whose continued existence posed a danger to millions of innocent lives. And they had all died in ways that appeared completely natural until examined by the most sophisticated forensic equipment available. The file contained one final entry, added just 6 months ago. Asset status unknown. Last confirmed activity, Corvani sector. Classification, extreme caution advised. Graunox leaned back in his chair, his massive frame suddenly feeling very small. The Corvani sector was where their mysterious prisoner had been captured. The timing was too precise to be coincidental. His communication panel chimed, displaying Admiral Zaktich's crystalline face. "Chief, I need you to review the prisoner transfer orders from the Corvani arrest. Something doesn't feel right about this." "Sir, I was just thinking the same thing. I've discovered some information that suggests our prisoner may not be the simple weapons dealer we thought." "How bad?" Graunox glanced at the classified file, still open on his screen. "Sir, I think we may have accidentally captured one of the most dangerous individuals in the galaxy." Admiral Zaktich was quiet for a moment. "I'm calling an emergency briefing in 1 hour. Bring everything you found." Meanwhile, in the station's main computer core, Senior Technician Mordak and Sarachin were discovering that their mystery was growing more complex by the hour. "This is impossible," Sarah muttered, staring at streams of data flowing across multiple screens. "The quantum encryption protecting the prisoner's cell has been accessed 847 times in the last 12 hours, but our system shows no record of any access attempts." Mordak's scales had shifted to a deep red color that indicated extreme agitation. "It gets worse. I've been monitoring power consumption throughout the station, and there's an energy drain that doesn't correspond to any registered systems." "How much a drain?" 0.003%. "Barely detectable, but it's constant, and it's coming from cell block 7. Sarah felt her stomach clench with anxiety. "That's not possible. The cells are designed to be completely self-contained. There's no way for a prisoner to tap into station power. Unless they're not actually in the cell." They stared at each other as the implications of that statement sank in. Sarah was the first to voice what they were both thinking. "Are you suggesting he's somehow moved outside his cell while maintaining the appearance of being inside?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying that the energy signatures don't match what we should be seeing from a standard containment situation." Sarah accessed her personal communication device and began a direct link to the Terran embassy. As a human herself, she had clearances that might allow her to access information that other species couldn't obtain. Embassy communications. "This is Sarah Chun. Exchange Student Identification 7749 Alpha. I need to speak with someone about a human prisoner currently being held at Nexus Station." The response came back immediately, but it wasn't what she expected. "Ms. Chun, please hold for priority Alpha transfer." Within seconds, the screen changed a show of face she didn't recognize, an older human woman with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see too much. "Ms. Chun, this is Director Hamilton of Terran Strategic Operations. We understand you have encountered an individual claiming to be human in the custody of Nexus Station." "Yes, ma'am. He was arrested in the Corvani sector for weapons dealing, but there are some unusual circumstances. Ms. Chun, I need you to listen very carefully. Under no circumstances should you or anyone else attempt to interact with this individual. Do not enter his cell, do not attempt communication, and do not allow anyone to conduct any procedures that might agitate him." Sarah felt ice forming in her veins. "Ma'am, what exactly are we dealing with?" Director Hamilton paused, her expression becoming grave. "Ms. Chun, approximately 60 years ago, the Terran Federation initiated a highly classified program in response to threats that conventional military forces couldn't address. The individuals produced by this program were designed to be the ultimate solution to problems that endangered galactic stability. What kind of problems? The kind that required surgical removal from the universe. Sarah exchanged glances with Mordak, who had been listening intently despite not understanding all the words. Ma'am, are you saying this person is some kind of assassin? I'm saying, Ms. Chun, that if the individual in your custody is who we think he is, then you're currently holding someone who has single-handedly prevented more wars, stopped more genocides, and saved more lives than any conventional military force in galactic history. But he did it through methods that most civilized species would consider morally unacceptable. How was that possible? Director Hamilton's expression became even more serious. Because sometimes, Ms. Chun, the only way to save millions of innocent lives is to kill the few individuals responsible for threatening them. And sometimes conventional justice systems are either too slow, too corrupt, or too politically constrained to do what needs to be done. Sarah felt herself beginning to understand the magnitude of what they were dealing with. So the Federation created what? Government assassins. The program produced exactly 12 operatives over a 20-year period. Each was enhanced beyond normal human capabilities and trained in methods that allowed them to eliminate targets that conventional forces couldn't touch. They worked in complete secrecy with no official acknowledgement of their existence. What happened to them? 11 of them died in service. One disappeared 30 years ago and was presumed dead. If your prisoner is who we think he is, then you're holding the last of the Reapers. Mordak, who had been using his translation implant to follow the conversation, made a sound that was the Yithrin equivalent of a gasp. Reaper. That's the word that's been appearing in our security anomalies. Director Hamilton's face became very still. Mr. Mordak, what kind of security anomalies? As Mordak explained the computer intrusions, the energy drain, and the impossible surveillance blackouts, Sarah watched Director Hamilton's expression grow increasingly concerned. Director, Sarah said when Mordak finished, what does it mean that these things are happening? It means, Ms. Chun, that he's waking up. And when a Reaper wakes up, it usually means someone is about to die. In cell block 7, the human opened his eyes for the first time in 72 hours. They were eyes that had seen the deaths of tyrants and the birth of peace treaties, eyes that had watched civilizations choose between survival and destruction, eyes that had looked into the face of evil so often that they had become mirrors of the void itself. Marcus Kane, once known throughout the galaxy by a title that made entire species tremble, slowly stood up. Around him, the energy field that had held him motionless for 3 days flickered and died, as if recognizing that it was no longer needed. He had been waiting for them to discover who he was, waiting for the political machinery to begin turning, waiting for the moment when the galaxy's leaders would have to decide whether to use him or try to destroy him. Because somewhere in the darkness between the stars, ancient enemies were stirring. The same enemies he had spent 40 years hunting, the same enemies whose return would make the border wars look like children's games. And whether the Galaxy Council knew it or not, they were going to need him again. The Reaper was awake. The emergency briefing room aboard Nexus Station had never hosted such a diverse group of senior officials. Admiral Zach Th stood at the head of the triangular table, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's lighting into prismatic patterns across the walls. Security Chief Growlnox occupied the chair designed for heavy-gravity species, his massive frame tense with barely controlled agitation. Dr. Ithera had positioned herself near the holographic display system, her compound eyes tracking multiple data streams simultaneously. But it was the newest arrival who commanded everyone's attention. Ambassador Veltar of the Hegemony High Council had arrived aboard Nexus Station just an hour earlier, accompanied by a security detail that included some of the most elite warriors in the galaxy. The ancient being's presence meant that whatever they were dealing with had attracted attention at the highest levels of galactic government. Before we begin, Admiral Zaktiech announced. I want to make it clear that everything discussed in this room is classified at the highest possible levels. We are dealing with a situation that could have profound implications for galactic security. Ambassador Veltar leaned forward slightly, the movement causing the temperature in the room to drop noticeably, a side effect of the ancient being's unique physiology. Admiral, my sources indicate that you have captured an individual of extraordinary significance. I need to know exactly what you know about your prisoner. Dr. Ithera activated the holographic display, showing the medical scans she had compiled over the past day. Ambassador, our prisoner appears to be a human male, approximately 40 standard years of age. However, his biological modifications are unlike anything in our medical database. The display showed detailed cross-sections of the prisoner's enhanced physiology, bones reinforced with unknown compounds, muscle fibers that have been systematically restructured for maximum efficiency, neural pathways that have been modified to allow for perfect emotional control. These modifications would have required decades to implement and access to medical technology that surpasses anything currently available to any known species, Dr. Ithera continued. Whoever performed this work had resources that suggest government-level backing. Security Chief Gralnox added his own findings. My investigation into galactic intelligence archives revealed limited references to an individual or individuals known by the designation Reaper. The file suggests this may be connected to a highly classified program that operated for several decades before going dark approximately 30 years ago. Ambassador Veltar's expression became very still, a sign that those familiar with the ancient being's species recognized as profound concern. Chief Gralnox, what exactly did these files tell you about this Reaper? Very little, sir. Just dates, locations, and confirmations of activity. But when I cross-referenced the dates with historical records, I discovered that each one corresponded to the death of a significant figure, usually someone whose actions had threatened galactic stability. How many dates? 137, sir, spread across 50 years. The room fell silent as the implications of that number sank in. Ambassador Veltar slowly rose from his chair, his considerable height making him tower over the other occupants of the room. Admiral, I need to speak with your prisoner immediately. Sir, with respect, I'm not certain that's advisable. We still don't fully understand what we're dealing with. Ambassador Veltar's ancient eyes fixed on Admiral Zaktiech with an intensity that made the crystalline being's core temperature fluctuate. Admiral, I'm going to tell you something that has been classified for over 2 centuries. During the Convergence Wars, when the Savage Collective was systematically exterminating civilian populations across 3 sectors, conventional military action proved insufficient to stop them. He paused, gathering his thoughts before continuing. The Collective's leadership operated from hidden bases, used civilian populations as shields, and had infiltrated so many government structures that traditional justice systems were compromised. Entire species faced extinction while we debated legal procedures and diplomatic solutions. Dr. Ithera's mandibles clicked nervously. What does this have to do with our prisoner? During that period, certain individuals began dying. Not in battle, not in obvious assassinations, but in ways that appeared completely natural until examined by the most sophisticated forensic equipment available. Heart failures, accidents, sudden illnesses, all affecting key figures in the Collective's power structure. Ambassador Veltar moved to the holographic display, manipulating the controls to show historical records from the Convergence Wars. Within 18 months, the Collective's leadership was so depleted that their organization collapsed. The genocide stopped. Billions of lives were saved. But no one could prove how it had happened. You're suggesting that this prisoner was responsible for assassinating political leaders during a galactic war? Admiral Zaktiech asked. I'm saying that if your prisoner is who I think he is, then he may be one of the most effective peacekeeping forces in galactic history. And if he has emerged from whatever hiding place he has occupied for the past 30 years, it means something terrible is about to happen. Security Chief Gralnox leaned forward. What kind of terrible? the kind that requires surgical intervention to prevent catastrophic loss of life. The briefing was interrupted by an urgent communication from the station's main computer core. Senior Technician Mordak's agitated face appeared on the room's main screen. "Admiral, we have a situation. The prisoner is no longer in his cell." Everyone in the room turned toward the screen with expressions of alarm. "Explain," Admiral Zakth demanded. "Sir, approximately 10 minutes ago, all monitoring equipment in Cell Block 7 went offline simultaneously. When we sent a security team to investigate, they found the cell empty. The energy barrier was still active. The locking mechanisms showed no signs of tampering, but the prisoner was gone." "How was that possible?" "We don't know, sir. We're reviewing all security footage from the past hour, but so far we've found no evidence of how he could have escaped." Ambassador Veltar moved to the communication console. "Mr. Mordak, has anyone conducted a full station search?" "In progress now, sir." "But, Ambassador, there's something else. We've detected multiple security breaches throughout the station's computer system. Someone with extremely sophisticated technical knowledge has accessed our most classified databases." "What kind of information were they looking for?" "Personnel records, duty schedules, security protocols. It's as if someone was conducting reconnaissance for something." Dr. Ithera felt her carapace tingling with anxiety. "Ambassador, what exactly are we dealing with?" "We're dealing with someone who has been trained to operate in hostile environments with no support, no backup, and no margin for error. Someone who has spent decades learning how to become invisible, untraceable, and utterly lethal when necessary." The communication console chimed again, this time showing the concerned face of Sarah Chun. "Admiral, I need to report something urgent. I've been in contact with Terran Strategic Operations, and they provided some critical information about our former prisoner." "What information?" "Sir, they've confirmed that the individual we captured is Marcus Kane, the last surviving member of a classified Terran program called the Reaper Initiative. According to my contact, he disappeared 30 years ago and was presumed dead." Ambassador Veltar's expression became very grave. "Ms. Chun, did your contact explain why Mr. Kane might have chosen to emerge from hiding now?" "Actually, sir, they said something very disturbing. They believe his appearance in the Corvani sector wasn't random. Intelligence indicates that an organization thought to have been destroyed during the Convergence Wars may be attempting to reform." "What organization?" "The Void Syndicate, sir. The group responsible for developing biological weapons designed to target specific species' genetic markers. The same group that killed over 2 billion civilians before the Reaper Initiative eliminated their leadership." The room fell completely silent. The Void Syndicate was a name that still caused nightmares among older generations of galactic citizens. They had been responsible for some of the most horrific atrocities in recorded history before mysteriously disappearing decades earlier. "Ms. Chun," Ambassador Veltar said carefully, "what exactly does Terran Strategic Operations want us to do?" "Sir, they want us to make contact with Kane. They believe that if the Void Syndicate is truly attempting to reform, he may be the only individual with the knowledge and capabilities necessary to stop them again." Security Chief Growl Knox's tail twitched anxiously. "And if we refuse, then we may be looking at the return of an organization capable of committing genocide on a scale that would make the Convergence Wars look minor by comparison." Ambassador Veltar stood motionless for several moments, weighing options that all carried terrible consequences. Finally, he turned back to the communication console. "Ms. Chun, please contact Terran Strategic Operations and inform them that the Hegemony Council is prepared to offer full cooperation with Mr. Kane's mission, whatever that mission might be." "Sir, there's one more thing. My contact said that if Kane has truly awakened from whatever deep cover operation he's been conducting, it means he's already identified specific targets that need to be eliminated." "What kind of targets?" "The kind, sir, that conventional law enforcement and military forces cannot touch. The kind that requires someone who can operate completely outside normal legal and ethical constraints." Dr. Ithera spoke up hesitantly. Ambassador, are we seriously considering sanctioning assassination? Ambassador Veltar turned to face her, his ancient features showing the weight of centuries of difficult decisions. Doctor, sometimes the choice is not between right and wrong, but between terrible and catastrophic. If the Void Syndicate is truly attempting to return, then we may have no choice but to employ methods that would normally be unthinkable. As if summoned by their conversation, the chamber's lighting suddenly dimmed. When it returned to normal brightness, a figure stood in the corner of the room, a human male who had somehow entered one of the most secure locations on the station without triggering a single alarm. Marcus Kane stood perfectly still, his dark eyes surveying each occupant of the room with a detached assessment of a predator evaluating potential threats. He wore the same gray prison uniform, but his posture and presence transformed the simple clothing into something that somehow seemed more intimidating than military armor. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, his voice carrying an undertone of authority that made everyone in the room instinctively straighten. "We need to talk." Ambassador Veltar was the first to recover from the shock of Kane's sudden appearance. "Mr. Kane, I presume. We were just discussing your situation." "I'm aware of what you were discussing, Ambassador. I'm also aware that time is running out faster than you realize." "What do you mean?" Kane moved to the holographic display, his movements so fluid they seemed almost inhuman. With practiced efficiency, he began calling up displays showing star charts, shipping routes, and communication intercept that shouldn't have been accessible to anyone without the highest security clearances. The Void Syndicate didn't just disappear 30 years ago. They went underground, rebuilt their organization, and developed new capabilities that make their previous atrocities look primitive by comparison. He highlighted several locations on the star chart, remote systems in uncharted regions, mining colonies that had gone dark in recent months, research stations that had reported unusual accidents. They've been systematically gathering resources, recruiting new members, and developing biological weapons that can target not just individual species, but specific genetic lineages within species. They're preparing to launch simultaneous attacks against the homeworlds of every major galactic power. Security Chief Growlnox leaned forward, his predator instincts responding to the threat Kane described. "How do you know this?" "Because I've been hunting them for 30 years, Chief. And because 3 days ago, I received intelligence that their first strike will occur in less than 72 hours. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a physical presence. Ambassador Veltar found his voice first. "Mr. Kane, what exactly are you asking of us?" Kane's expression remained perfectly neutral, but something in his eyes suggested depths of experience that none of them could comprehend. "I'm not asking anything, Ambassador. I'm telling you that the Void Syndicate must be stopped, and I'm the only person in the galaxy with the knowledge and capabilities necessary to do it. The question is whether you're prepared to provide the support I need, or whether you prefer to watch billions of innocent people die while you debate the ethics of necessary action." The choice, as Ambassador Veltar had predicted, was between terrible and catastrophic. And time was running out. The war room aboard the hegemony flagship Eternal Vigilance had been configured for the most serious type of military briefing possible. Representatives from 12 species sat around the curve table, each one a leader capable of authorizing military action that could affect billions of lives. But despite their collective power and experience, every eye was focused on the human who stood at the center of the room. Marcus Kane had been provided with appropriate civilian clothing, dark tactical gear that somehow made him appear even more dangerous than the simple prison uniform. He moved with the controlled precision of someone who had spent decades operating in environments where a single mistake meant death, but there was something else in his bearing now. A sense of urgency that made the assembled leaders understand that whatever he was about to tell them would change everything. Ambassador Veltar spoke first. "Mr. Kane, you have requested the presence of the highest military authorities from every major species in the galaxy. They are here because preliminary intelligence confirms that your warnings about the Void Syndicate may be accurate. We need to know everything you know. Kane activated the holographic display system with movements that suggested he was intimately familiar with technology far more advanced than what most civilians would have access to. The display showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with specific systems highlighted in various colors. The Void Syndicate has been operating under multiple cover identities for the past 30 years, Kane began, his voice carrying the flat authority of someone delivering a briefing that would determine the fate of civilizations. They've infiltrated mining operations, research facilities, and shipping companies across 17 sectors. He manipulated the display to show shipping routes and communication patterns. During that time, they've been systematically gathering three things: rare biological samples from every major species, access to advanced genetic research facilities, and the components necessary to manufacture biological weapons on an industrial scale. General Thaxmore of the Corvani Defense Force leaned forward, his scarred features showing the concern of someone who had spent his career fighting conventional wars. Mr. Kane, what makes you certain that these are connected activities rather than separate criminal enterprises? Because, General, I've been tracking key syndicate operatives for 3 decades, and because 18 months ago, they made a critical mistake that revealed the scope of their operations. Kane called up a new display showing surveillance footage from a remote research station. The images showed figures in environmental suits moving with military precision through laboratory facilities. This footage was recovered from the Xerian research station after it was reported destroyed in an industrial accident. The official investigation concluded that faulty containment systems caused a catastrophic explosion that killed all 87 personnel. He enhanced the image quality, revealing details that had been previously hidden. But advanced analysis shows that the explosion was deliberately triggered to destroy evidence. And these figures, he highlighted several of the suited individuals, are confirmed Void Syndicate operatives who were supposed to have died during the Convergence Wars. Admiral Kethvar of the Hegemony Deep Space Fleet studied the footage carefully. What were they looking for at Xerian? Xerian was conducting research into cross-species genetic compatibility for medical applications. But their real value to the Syndicate was their collection of genetic samples from over 200 species, including several that are considered extinct. The implications of that statement caused a ripple of alarm around the table. Dr. Silthara, the Hegemony's chief medical advisor, spoke up with obvious concern. Mr. Kane, are you suggesting they intend to create biological weapons that can target species that no longer exist? I'm suggesting, Doctor, that they've discovered ways to use extinct genetic markers as templates for creating weapons that can target related species with devastating effectiveness. A weapon designed to target the extinct Valerian species, for example, will be 93% effective against modern Corvani populations. General Thaxmore's face went pale as the reality of that threat sank in. That's genocide on a scale that exceeds anything we've seen before, Kane finished. But it gets worse. He called up new displays showing industrial facilities scattered across remote regions of space. Over the past 6 months, the Syndicate has been constructing manufacturing facilities in uncharted systems. Our intelligence indicates they're preparing to produce biological weapons in sufficient quantities to target every major populated world simultaneously. Commander Vexera of the Trillion Defense Corps studied the facility schematics with the expertise of someone trained in siege warfare. Mr. Kane, what kind of timeline are we looking at? Based on intercepted communications and observed supply movements, the Syndicate will be ready to launch coordinated strikes against primary targets within 60 hours. The room fell silent as the assembled leaders absorbed the magnitude of the threat Kane had described. Finally, Ambassador Veltar spoke. Mr. Kane, what exactly are you proposing? Kane's expression remained neutral, but his eyes carried the weight of someone who had made decisions that haunted civilizations. The Syndicate's leadership consists of 7 individuals who have spent 3 decades preparing for this moment. They operate from hidden facilities that conventional military forces cannot locate or assault without triggering the very attacks we're trying to prevent. And I'm proposing to eliminate them before they can implement their plan. General Thaxmore leaned back in his chair, his scarred features showing the strain of contemplating Kane's suggestion. Mr. Kane, you're talking about assassination. Multiple assassinations, conducted without trial, without due process, without any of the legal protections that civilized species consider fundamental. General, I'm talking about preventing the deaths of approximately 40 billion innocent people. The legal niceties can be debated by whoever survives the aftermath. Dr. Silthera spoke up hesitantly. Mr. Kane, how can you be certain that elimination these 7 individuals will stop the syndicate's operations? Kane called up a new display showing organizational charts and communication networks. Because I've spent 30 years learning how they operate. The syndicate functions as a highly centralized organization with these 7 individuals controlling all critical decisions. Remove them, and the entire network collapses within hours. Admiral Kethvar studied the organizational data carefully. This level of intelligence would require access to highly classified information from multiple sources. How did you obtain it? Admiral, for the past 3 decades, I've operated under deep cover within organizations that had connections to syndicate operations. I've infiltrated their supply networks, monitored their communications, and eliminated peripheral operatives who posed immediate threats. This intelligence was gathered at considerable personal cost over an extended period. Kumande Baksara Fronat. Mr. Kane, if you've known about this threat for so long, why didn't you act sooner? Kane's expression became very still, and for a moment, something that might have been regret flickered across his features. Because eliminating the syndicate leadership would require capabilities and resources that I could not access while operating alone. And because previous experience taught me that premature action often causes more harm than the original threat. Ambassador Veltar leaned forward. What do you mean by that? Ambassador, 30 years ago, I eliminated the syndicate's leadership structure during the Convergence Wars. But I did it without understanding the full scope of their operations and without ensuring that all of their capabilities were neutralized. The survivors went underground, rebuilt their organization, and spent 3 decades developing weapons and strategies specifically designed to counter the methods I used against them. The weight of that admission settled over the room like a physical presence. Kane had not only fought this enemy before, he had created the current threat by failing to completely eliminate them the first time. General Thaxmore spoke quietly. Mr. Kane, what makes you think you can succeed this time when you've failed before? Kane's response carried the absolute certainty of someone who had spent decades preparing for a single moment. Because this time, General, I know exactly what I'm dealing with. I understand their capabilities, their limitations, and their psychological profiles. And because this time, I'm not operating alone. He gestured toward the assembled leaders. With your authorization and support, I can coordinate strikes against all 7 leadership targets simultaneously, using methods and resources that will ensure complete elimination of their operational capabilities. Admiral Ketvar studied Kane carefully. What exactly are you asking for? Transportation to 7 specific locations, electronic warfare support to disrupt their communications during the assault, and authorization to use whatever methods prove necessary to complete the mission. Dr. Silthera's compound eyes reflected her obvious discomfort with what Kane was proposing. Mr. Kane, you're asking us to authorize actions that violate every principle of civilized behavior. Kane turned to face her directly, his expression showing none of the emotion his words suggested he felt. Doctor, I'm asking you to choose between principles and survival. The Void Syndicate has no interest in negotiation, no respect for civilian populations, and no limitations on the methods they're willing to use. They view this galaxy as a resource to be exploited and its inhabitants as obstacles to be eliminated. But surely there must be some alternative to assassination. Doctor, What alternative would you suggest? Diplomatic negotiation with terrorists who have spent 3 decades preparing to commit genocide? Military action against facilities that are booby-trapped to release biological weapons, if attacked? Legal proceedings against individuals who have been declared dead for 30 years and operate from locations that exist outside any recognized jurisdiction? Commander Vexera interrupted the debate. Mr. Kane, even if we authorize your mission, how can you guarantee success? These individuals have evaded capture and elimination for decades. What makes you think you can find and eliminate all of them in the limited time we have? Kane manipulated the holographic display to show detailed intelligence profiles for each of the 7 syndicate leaders. Commander, I can guarantee success because I've already found them. I know where they are, what security measures protect them, and what methods will be required to eliminate each one. The profile showed individuals from various species, each with extensive criminal histories and capabilities that made them extremely dangerous opponents. But more disturbing were the notations Kane had added to each profile: detailed psychological assessments, behavioral patterns, and tactical vulnerabilities that suggested he had been studying these individuals with obsessive thoroughness. Ambassador Veltar studied the profiles with growing unease. Mr. Kane, this level of surveillance suggests capabilities that concern me. How long have you been tracking these individuals? Ambassador, I've been tracking various members of this organization for 30 years. Some longer than others, but all of them long enough to understand exactly how they operate and exactly how they can be stopped. General Thaxmore leaned forward, his military instincts responding to something in Kane's tone. Mr. Kane, are you saying you've been conducting unauthorized surveillance operations within sovereign territories for 3 decades? Kane's response carried no hint of apology or regret. General, I'm saying I've been doing whatever was necessary to protect innocent lives from a threat that conventional authorities were unwilling or unable to address. The assembled leaders exchanged glances that conveyed the complexity of the situation they faced. They were being asked to authorize actions that violated every principle of civilized behavior by someone whose methods were themselves questionable to prevent a threat that might be even worse than the cure. Ambassador Veltar finally spoke for the group. Mr. Kane, we need time to consider your proposal. The decision to authorize what you're suggesting cannot be made lightly. Kane checked a timepiece that none of them had noticed him wearing. Ambassador, in approximately 57 hours, the Void Syndicate will begin releasing biological weapons designed to eliminate specific population groups across 12 worlds. Every minute we spend debating ethics is a minute that brings us closer to the deaths of billions of innocent people. And if we refuse your request, Kane's expression became completely neutral, but his words carried implications that made everyone in the room understand exactly what kind of individual they were dealing with. Then, I will proceed with the mission using whatever resources I can obtain independently. The only difference will be that without your support, the probability of complete success decreases from 97% to approximately 63%. The silence that followed made it clear that Marcus Kane, the last of the Reapers, was not making a request. He was informing them of their options, and time was running out. The authorization came through with 47 hours remaining until the projected Void Syndicate attack. Ambassador Veltar delivered the decision personally, his ancient features showing the weight of a choice that had divided the Galactic Council along lines that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with the fundamental question of how far civilized beings could go to protect civilization itself. Mr. Kane, the ambassador said quietly, by a vote of 7 to 5, the Council has authorized your mission. You will have access to whatever resources you require, transportation to all target locations, and electronic warfare support as requested. Kane nodded once, a simple gesture that somehow conveyed both acknowledgement and the absolute certainty of someone who had never doubted the outcome. Thank you, Ambassador. I'll need 3 hours to complete final preparations, and then I'll begin the operation. Mr. Kane, General Thaxmore interrupted. I need to ask one more time. Are you absolutely certain this is the only way? Kane turned to face the general, and, for just a moment, something that might have been regret flickered across his features. General, 30 years ago, I asked myself the same question. I spent months looking for alternatives, trying to find ways to stop the syndicate without resorting to assassination. And while I was searching for a more civilized solution, they released biological weapons that killed 2 billion innocent people. He paused, his dark eyes reflecting memories that no one else in the room could comprehend. I will not make that mistake again. The operation began with a level of coordination that impressed even the most experienced military leaders present. Marcus Kane had requested access to 7 of the hegemony's most advanced stealth ships, each equipped with electronic warfare capabilities that could disrupt communications across entire star systems. But what truly demonstrated the scope of his preparation was the detailed operational plan he presented for each target. The first target was Dr. Yalex Vorth, a Telvanni scientist who had been declared dead during a research accident 25 years earlier. Kane's intelligence indicated that Vorth was operating from a hidden laboratory within an asteroid mining facility in the Kepler Reach, where he had been developing genetic targeting systems for the Syndicate's biological weapons. The facility has automated defenses designed to release weaponized pathogens if breached by conventional assault, Kane explained to the strike team commanders. However, the defense systems have a vulnerability in their atmospheric monitoring protocols that can be exploited using focused electromagnetic pulses delivered at specific frequencies. Admiral Kethvar, who was coordinating the overall operation, studied the attack plan with professional appreciation. Mr. Kane, this level of tactical intelligence suggests you've had direct access to the facility's construction specifications. Admiral, I provided those specifications. 25 years ago, I was the contractor who designed the security systems Dr. Vorth is now using to protect himself. The implications of that statement created a moment of silence among the assembled officers. Kane had not merely been tracking the syndicate. He had been anticipating their movements and preparing countermeasures for decades. The second target was former Hegemony intelligence officer Kraltev, who had disappeared during an investigation into syndicate activities and was presumed to have defected. Kane's intelligence placed him aboard a modified cargo vessel that operated in the neutral zones between territorial boundaries, coordinating supply shipments to syndicate facilities. Kraltev's ship is equipped with quantum encryption systems that make conventional electronic warfare ineffective, Kane continued. However, the encryption keys are generated using a mathematical algorithm that has a predictable vulnerability every 47 hours and 13 minutes. Kumande Baksara Fronat. How could you possibly know something that's specific about an encryption system? Because I designed that algorithm, Commander. Kraltev is using security systems that I built with deliberate weaknesses for exactly this purpose. As Kane continued through the operational plans for all 7 targets, it became clear that he had not simply been hunting the Void Syndicate for 30 years. He had been manipulating them. Every piece of technology they used, every security system they trusted, every hiding place they considered safe had been influenced by Marcus Kane's long-term planning. General Thaxmore finally voiced what everyone was thinking. Mr. Kane, you've been playing a game that lasted 3 decades. How long had you been planning this final operation? Kane's response carried the weight of someone who had sacrificed everything for a single purpose. General, I've been planning this operation since the day I failed to completely eliminate the Syndicate the first time. Every decision they've made, every resource they've acquired, every strategy they've developed has been influenced by information I provided through various channels. You've been manipulating them. I've been hurting them, General. For 30 years, I've been guiding them toward a position where they would be vulnerable to complete elimination. Today, that work is finally ready to be completed. The first strike occurred precisely on schedule. Dr. Vorth's laboratory facility was infiltrated using access codes that Kane had embedded in the facility's construction 25 years earlier. The electromagnetic pulse disabled the defensive systems exactly as predicted, and the biological weapons under development were destroyed using counteragents that Kane had spent decades perfecting. Dr. Vorth himself was eliminated while attempting to activate a dead man switch that would have released weaponized pathogens into the facility's life support system. Kane's intelligence had predicted that response as well, and the switch had been disabled before Vorth reached it. The second strike encountered unexpected resistance when Kraltef's ship proved to have additional defenses that weren't in Kane's intelligence files. But rather than abort the mission, Kane adapted in real time, using his knowledge of Kraltef's psychological profile to predict the former intelligence officer's tactical responses. "He's running for the nebula barrier," Kane reported over the communication link. "He believes the charged particles will interfere with our targeting systems." "Will they?" Admiral Kethvar asked. "No," I admitted. "But Kraltef believes they will because that's what I taught him during his intelligence training 15 years ago. He doesn't know that I've developed countermeasures for that specific defensive strategy." The strike succeeded when Kraltef's ship was disabled by weapons fire that somehow penetrated defenses that should have been impregnable. The former intelligence officer was captured alive, but chose to activate a neural implant that killed him rather than risk interrogation. As the operation continued, it became clear that Marcus Kane's planning had been even more comprehensive than anyone had realized. Each target had been maneuvered into positions where they were vulnerable to elimination using methods they couldn't anticipate or defend against. But, more importantly, Kane had ensured that the destruction of the Syndicate leadership would trigger the automatic destruction of their weapons stockpiles and production facilities. The facilities are equipped with self-destruct systems that activate if they don't receive authorization codes from the leadership every 12 hours. Kane explained as reports came in of secondary explosions across multiple star systems. With the leadership eliminated, the entire network is destroying itself. By the time the seventh and final target had been eliminated, the Void Syndicate had ceased to exist as an operational threat. Their biological weapons had been destroyed, their production facilities had been reduced to radioactive debris, and their support networks had collapsed without central coordination. But as the immediate crisis ended, the assembled leaders found themselves confronting a new problem. What to do with Marcus Kane himself? "Mr. Kane," Ambassador Veltar said carefully, "the galaxy owes you an enormous debt. Billions of lives have been saved because of your actions." Kane stood before the assembled leaders, his expression as neutral as it had been throughout the operation. "Ambassador, I didn't do this for gratitude or recognition. I did it because it needed to be done. Nevertheless, the question remains, what happens now?" Kane was quiet for a moment, and for the first time since they had met him, the assembled leaders saw something that might have been exhaustion cross his features. "Ambassador, for 30 years, I've lived for a single purpose, stopping the Void Syndicate before they could complete their genocide. That purpose has been fulfilled. And now I'm just a man who has done terrible things for necessary reasons, and who has no place in the galaxy he helped to save." General Thaxmore leaned forward. "Mr. Kane, surely there are other threats that could benefit from your unique capabilities." Kane's smile was barely visible, but it carried implications that made several of the leaders unconsciously lean away from him. "General, the last thing this galaxy needs is someone like me actively looking for new problems to solve. The methods I use should only be employed when the alternative is the end of civilization itself." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying that Marcus Kane is going to disappear again. Permanently this time." Ambassador Veltar studied Kane carefully. "And if the galaxy faces another threat like the Void Syndicate, then the galaxy will find another solution, Ambassador. Or will learn to live with the consequences of its choices." Kane moved toward the chamber's exit, his movements carrying the same fluid precision they had displayed throughout the operation. But as he reached the doorway, he paused and turned back to face the assembled leaders one final time. "There's something you need to understand about what happened here. The Void Syndicate was eliminated not because I'm particularly skilled at assassination, but because I spent 30 years learning to think like them, to anticipate their choices to become the kind of person who could match their ruthlessness with strategic planning. He paused, his dark eyes reflecting depths that none of them could comprehend. That transformation comes with a cost that no civilized person should be asked to pay. I've spent 3 decades becoming something that civilization needs, but cannot acknowledge, something that must exist in the darkness so that others can live in the light. Ambassador Veltar found his voice. Mr. Kane, are you saying we shouldn't have authorized your mission? No, Ambassador. I'm saying you shouldn't have needed to. And if you're wise, you'll work very hard to ensure you never need someone like me again. With that, Marcus Kane walked out of the chamber and disappeared into the corridors of the Hegemony flagship. Despite extensive searches and monitoring of all transportation systems, no trace of him was ever found. The official records listed the elimination of the Void Syndicate as a successful joint military operation. No mention was made of assassination, of illegal surveillance, or of the moral compromises that had made victory possible. The galaxy's leaders agreed that some truths were too dangerous to acknowledge publicly. But in the classified archives of every major government, a new file was created. It contained no details, no explanations, just a single notation that was meant to serve as a warning for future generations. When conventional methods prove insufficient, when civilization itself hangs in the balance, remember that there are those who walk in darkness so that others may live in light. Use this knowledge wisely, for the cost of such protection is always higher than those who benefit from it can imagine. The Reaper had completed his final mission. The galaxy was safe, and somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, a legend returned to the shadows where legends belonged, carrying the weight of choices that history would never record but would never forget. Peace, it turned out, was a terrible thing to achieve. But it was worth any price, even the price of one's own humanity. The silence that followed was deeper than the void itself.